This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and more dangerous. Because while everyone is watching the noise, a system you were taught was permanent is quietly being reclassified, not debated, not voted on, just treated differently, as if its rules are optional now, as if its promises have an expiration date. For decades, stability depended on one assumption, that certain lines were not bargaining chips, that sovereignty was not a price tag, that alliances were not provisional. That assumption is no longer safe. You can feel it in the way governments are moving without announcing why, in the way decisions are being prepared before the public is told there's a problem, in the way words like exercise, partnership, and respect are suddenly doing a lot of heavy lifting. If you're wondering why this feels urgent without being loud, stay with me, because what's shifting right now doesn't break overnight. It tilts, and then it accelerates. If this matters to you, don't click away. You'll want the next piece. For a long time, you were told this system was held together by leaders, by elections, by personalities, that if the right people were in the right rooms, the machinery would correct itself. That was never true. What actually controls the system now is leverage, transactional leverage. Who can apply pressure without paying immediate cost? Who can threaten without pulling the trigger? Who can turn norms into negotiating positions? Institutions still exist. Treaties still exist. Alliances still exist, but they are no longer the drivers. They are the scenery. The real motion is happening underneath, where power is measured not by credibility, but by how much instability you can generate before someone blinks. This is the pivot, from rules to tests, from commitments to probes. And once a system starts rewarding pressure instead of trust, everything inside it recalibrates. Allies stop waiting for reassurance, markets stop assuming continuity, governments stop taking words at face value. They begin preparing quietly, independently. That's the frame you need to see what happens next. Because the most dangerous shifts don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves through movement. And that movement has already begun. There was a time when certain ideas didn't need defending. Territory was fixed. Allies were partners. Force was a last resort, not an opening bid. That wasn't because everyone agreed. It was because the cost of violating those assumptions was too high. What changed wasn't a single decision. It was normalization. Slowly, language shifted. Claims became jokes. Threats became leverage. Unthinkable scenarios became hypothetical discussions. Before, power worked through reassurance. Now, it works through ambiguity. And ambiguity is dangerous because it teaches systems to adapt without permission. When no one knows whether a red line is real, they stop waiting for clarity. They start acting preemptively. They hedge, they harden positions. They rehearse outcomes they once dismissed. This is how stability erodes without collapsing. Not with alarms, with adjustments. By the time the public notices, the system has already accepted a new baseline. One where uncertainty is normal, one where preparation replaces trust. That's the shift you're watching. And it's why the next moment doesn't feel sudden at all. What breaks the quiet is not a speech. It's movement. Uniforms arriving where they were never meant to arrive. Aircraft landing under banners labeled exercise. Allies deploying not outward, but inward, toward each other. On paper, this is coordination, training, preparedness. In reality, it's a signal. When multiple allied governments independently decide they need boots on the ground to protect the sovereignty of one partner from another, that is not diplomacy. That is insurance. The kind you buy when trust is no longer sufficient. Notice what's missing. There is no declaration of crisis, no emergency summit, no formal rupture, just readiness. This isn't about one territory. It's about the precedent being rehearsed. Because once force becomes a credible possibility inside an alliance, every member has to ask the same question. What if next time it's us? If this feels like an overreaction, stay with me. That assumption is exactly what allows systems to drift unnoticed. If you want to understand why governments are acting before voters are told there's a problem, make sure you're still here. Because what this movement reveals is not reassurance. It's anticipation. Here's the part most people never see. This isn't chaos. It's accounting. When pressure replaces trust, systems don't collapse. They redistribute risk, quietly, efficiently, predictably. Those with power externalize uncertainty. Those without it absorb the shock. The mechanism is simple. When a dominant actor signals that agreements are flexible, everyone else must spend resources preparing for outcomes that used to be unthinkable. Military readiness, trade diversification, diplomatic hedging, none of it shows up as a crisis. All of it carries cost. Who benefits? The actor who can force recalculation without committing, who can float threats, jokes, hypotheticals, while others mobilize real assets in response. Who pays? Allies who must ensure against volatility they didn't create, democracies forced to defend stability against ambiguity, citizens who never voted for the risk but will fund the response. This is how leverage compounds, not through action, through implication. And once this mechanism starts running, it doesn't need constant input. It feeds on reaction. Every preparation validates the threat. Every hedge confirms the danger. That's why what comes next escalates faster, because now the system knows the signal works. And it will be used again. Now it speeds up. Shorter timelines, tighter margins, less room for correction. Signals multiply, reassurances shrink. One deployment becomes two. One statement triggers three responses. One ambiguity forces 5 contingency plans. This is escalation without announcement, because every actor is now solving for the same variable, unreliability. And the moment unreliability enters the system, everyone optimizes for self-protection. Coordination gives way to redundancy. Trust gives way to verification. Cooperation becomes conditional. You can see it in how quickly positions harden, in how fast alternatives are explored, in how casually words like end, collapse, and rethink enter conversations that used to be procedural. No one says this is a breaking point. They don't need to. The system is already operating as if one is coming. And here's the danger. Escalation driven by precaution doesn't feel aggressive. It feels responsible, sensible, necessary, until it isn't. Because once enough actors move at once, momentum replaces intent. Decisions are no longer about choosing conflict. They're about avoiding being the only one unprepared. That's the cliff. And we're closer to it than anyone is willing to say out loud. At some point, this stops being abstract. It reaches you, not as a headline, as a constraint. Because when governments start paying the insurance premium of uncertainty, that money comes from somewhere. It comes from delayed projects, from thinner safety nets, from choices narrowed quietly, without explanation. You feel it as instability without a name, as prices that don't quite settle, as jobs that depend on markets suddenly labeled strategic, as policies that feel provisional because they are. You're told this is resilience, adaptation, prudence, but what it really is cost shifting. The price of geopolitical ambiguity doesn't land on the people who generate it. It lands on the people who live inside its consequences. On you budgeting around volatility you didn't vote for. On communities adjusting to risks they were never consulted about. If this feels personal, it should. Because systems don't fail all at once. They fail by passing weight downward until something gives. If you want to understand why your future feels less predictable than it used to, stay with me. Share this. Keep watching, because the next stage doesn't stop at borders. It spreads. Once that pressure crosses borders, it stops being manageable. What began as internal recalibration becomes external realignment. Allies quietly explore new trade routes, new security guarantees, new partners who don't ask uncomfortable questions, not because they want to, because uncertainty forces choice. When trust erodes at the center, gravity shifts outward. Systems reorganize around reliability, not history. Around predictability, not loyalty. And those shifts don't happen with announcements. They happen with meetings, with visits, with memoranda that sound technical and irreversible. This is how a global order changes without declaring itself changed. You can see it in how multilateral language thins, in how shared values are replaced by shared interests, in how cooperation becomes modular, issue by issue, deal by deal. The danger isn't that one country loses influence. It's that the rules governing influence dissolve. Because once coordination fragments, crises don't stay contained. A shock in one region reroutes supply chains elsewhere. A security question in one alliance reshapes markets in another. At that point, no one is just responding anymore. They're repositioning. And repositioning assumes the future will not look like the past. That assumption is already spreading. From here, the future doesn't arrive as a single outcome. It branches. There are 3 paths visible now. None of them are theoretical. The first is adjustment. The system absorbs the shock. Institutions adapt. Guardrails are reinforced quietly. Alliances hold, but thinner, more conditional, less sentimental. Stability survives, but only by becoming more rigid, more transactional, less forgiving. The second is erosion. Nothing breaks outright. Instead, norms hollow out. Treaties remain on paper while behavior drifts. Cooperation becomes situational. Trust becomes nostalgic. The system keeps functioning, but only because everyone lowers their expectations at the same time. And then there is rupture. Not sudden, not cinematic. A moment where preparation turns into miscalculation, where deterrence is misread, where an action meant as insurance is interpreted as intent. And once that happens, the machinery that was built to prevent crisis becomes the engine of it. Right now, all 3 paths are active. Different actors are betting on different outcomes. None of them control the whole board. That's what makes this moment dangerous. The future is being shaped before anyone agrees on what game they're playing. And the next move won't come with an explanation. There's no closing argument here, because the system you're watching hasn't decided what it is yet. It's operating in between definitions, between alliance and transaction, between commitment and convenience, between deterrence and temptation. And systems in between are the most volatile because they invite testing. What matters now isn't outrage. It isn't loyalty. It's attention. Because the next phase won't announce itself as a crisis. It will look like another adjustment, another workaround, another temporary measure that never quite goes away. If you're waiting for reassurance, you won't get it. Not from the system, not from the signals it's sending. What you can do is stay alert to the pattern. Watch movement, not words. Track preparation, not promises. Notice who is insuring against whom. If you want to understand where this leads, this isn't the end of the conversation. It's the entry point. Stay with me. Follow this thread. Because the moment everyone agrees something has changed, it will already have changed too much. And the next question won't be whether the system failed, it will be who adapted in time. That's where we go next.